Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
Sometimes the best way to find a living is to stay right where you are and study with UAS online. Career-specific distance programs from the University of Alaska Southeast are the fastest way to increase your earning power.
We connect all over the world.
The National Weather Service.
Good evening, I'm David Kramer here with Alaska Weather. As always, please visit our website at weather.gov/Alaska. You can get any updates to our forecast or watches, warnings, advisories that we have out for the state. You can also call our weather info line 1-800-472-0391. Get any updates to the forecast through that means as well. And you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and on YouTube. So one of the things that we want to get started with here is for the southeast part of the state, so for the Panhandle. We do want to look at when the growing season is starting. We know we've had a lot of nice weather there recently, so I want to point out that the averages for the last freeze of the season are actually a little bit later than we might think with some of the nicer conditions. So a lot of them in late April or early into May, so keep in mind that we're not necessarily past all of the last freezes, so even though the growing season looks like it might be starting, bear that in mind if you're out there trying to grow crops or plant a garden. So out for advisories that we have out for the state, all along the Arctic coast, we have 3 of them out there, and that is they are all winter weather advisories for blowing snow. So we have high pressure out over the Arctic Ocean, and that is creating a really tight pressure gradient along the coastline. So we're going to see some really strong easterly winds, and that's going to last in through Sunday at 6 a.m. and those winds are going to kick up snow that is already on the ground. So we're not expecting a lot of new snowfall, but there will be enough wind and mixing in with the fog conditions, so we are going to have the blowing snow and fog that's going to drop visibility potentially down to a half mile or less at times. And again, that is already active and going to last until 6 a.m. on Sunday. So we look at our satellite, we can see out over the Arctic coastline. We have a lot of lower clouds indicated by those darker cloud tops, and even though a lot of it's burning off out over the interior part of the state, we are seeing that linger around north of the Brooks Range throughout the whole time. We are expecting that low stratus and fog to continue out there. As we move out more out over the Bering Sea, we can watch this loop again. We have a front pushing through that's making its way towards the eastern Bering, and that is actually stalling out. You can see it really slowing down there, but we are seeing a lot of warmer air come up from the south with that system. Out to the west of that front, we have some showery precipitation coming into the western Aleutian Islands. A little bit colder air coming in behind this, starting to transition some of those rain showers to mix in with some snow. And then finally, way out to the east, we can watch a low that is south of the Panhandle area, but bringing in some showers to areas just to the south, starting to push them closer and closer towards the Panhandle. So as we look at the weather for the remainder of the day, again, those showers not quite making it there, even though we are starting to see some cloud cover over the southern portions of the Panhandle, but the rain staying off to the south for now. Moving out towards the west, we have high pressure dominating the Gulf of Alaska, helping to keep much of mainland Alaska cloud and precipitation free. But along the Arctic coastline, we are seeing fog and blowing snow conditions that will last through the rest of the evening into the nighttime hours. As we make our way out over the eastern Bering Sea, we have our front pushing through, slowing down, however, but bringing rain to areas of the Pribilof Islands, eastern Aleutians, and Alaska Peninsula. At ahead of that warm front, we do have some colder temperatures, still bringing in some areas of snow to St. Lawrence Island. Behind this cold front, colder air bringing in a mix of rain and snow showers to the western Aleutian Islands. Moving into tonight, that front barely moving off to the east as it's starting to stall, and we are seeing those rain and snow showers extend now into the central Aleutian Islands as well as the western Aleutians. Ahead of our system, that southerly flow bringing in rain to the eastern Aleutians and Alaska Peninsula, as well as areas of the Pribilof Islands, but starting to get colder as we get further to the north and bringing snow areas north of St. Matthew Island. Out over mainland Alaska, not a lot in terms of precipitation, except way out in eastern parts of the interior, some isolated snow showers expected tonight there. And then along the Arctic coastline, we are seeing some areas of fog with some blowing snow with those strong easterly winds that will last through the night and through Saturday. Then as we move out towards the Panhandle, we can see that showers from the low south of the area are starting to push in. Going to see primarily rain showers, but some areas a little bit further towards the mainland and at higher elevations we'll see some snow mix in as well. Then as we move into Saturday, those rain showers are going to push even further towards the central parts of the Panhandle. Still should be warm enough, especially in the afternoon hours, to see all rain now with warmer air down there for the Panhandle area. High pressure continuing to settle in over the Gulf of Alaska with some areas of fog underneath that. Much of the southern part of the mainland shouldn't see any precipitation, but we are going to see some isolated snow showers in areas of the central and eastern interior, especially at higher elevations. Then along the Arctic coastline, fog and blowing snow conditions lasting through Saturday. Again, those advisories are out until Sunday morning at 6 a.m. Our front now really becoming stationary as we move into Saturday, but still southerly flow on the eastern side of it, bringing in rain to the eastern Aleutian Islands and Alaska Peninsula, but switching over to snow as we get further to the north. However, on Saturday should be west of St. Lawrence Island. We'll just see some fog out there, and then enough cold air finally making it in for the western parts of the Bering Sea to bring snow showers to the western and central Aleutian Islands. On Sunday, a new system starting to make its way towards the western Aleutians. A lot of warm air with this system, so maybe a brief shot of snow out ahead of it, but it's going to quickly transition over to rain as that front pushes in. As we look at our low lingering out there south of the Alaska Peninsula, the front really dissipating now, but still southerly flow bringing in some rain to the Alaska Peninsula area, areas around the eastern parts of the Bering Sea, and then to the north and west of Dillingham, expecting to see some rain and snow showers. Also along the Arctic Strait, or the Bering Strait, we are going to see some snow showers up there, and finally starting to see some clearing along the Arctic coastline. As we drop down into more southern parts of the mainland, we see in the eastern parts of the Alaska Range, we're going to see some isolated snow showers there, but high pressure continuing over the northern parts of the Gulf. Rain showers continuing as well for the Panhandle area, from central areas of the Panhandle through southern areas. Should be primarily rain, maybe in the morning hours, higher elevations mixing in with some snow, but especially as we get to the afternoon hours, all those showers should be rain. Looking at temperatures as of 2 p.m. this afternoon, all in the 50s for the Panhandle, 59 for Yakutat. As we look out over the south central area, do have primarily in the 50s, but a little bit colder as we get closer towards the Gulf. Seward, 47 degrees, Middleton Island, 48. And as we move into the Copper River Basin, a little colder there as well, 46 degrees as of 2 p.m. this afternoon for Glen Allen. Moving into the interior part of the state, primarily in the 40s with Fairbanks at 49, Bettles right around 40. As we move up through the pass, dropping down quite a bit, 25 degrees this afternoon for through Anaktuvuk Pass. And then as we move up for the Arctic coastline, primarily in the teens as we move from Bethel and further to the east towards Kaktovik, or Barrow rather. And then as we go down towards the western part of the state in the Kotzebue Sound area, in the 30s with Kotzebue being at 34 degrees. As we drop down into the Norton Sound area, right around freezing there as well. Nome at 30 degrees this afternoon. Gamble out there, 33 degrees, just above freezing. Looking in the southwestern part of the state along the coastline of the YK Delta, just above freezing at 33 degrees. But as we get further inland, Bethel at 40 degrees with Antioch at 43. And then as we move down into the Bristol Bay area, primarily in the lower 40s, moving down to the Alaska Peninsula in the mid to upper 30s there, except for areas on the Pacific side like Sand Point seeing 43 degrees this afternoon. On Alaska at 40 degrees, mid 40s for the central Aleutian Islands. Colder out there by Shemya, 33 degrees there this afternoon, 36 for St. Paul and 38 for St. George. So look down for lows tonight, mid 30s throughout much of the Aleutian Islands, and that pushes into the Alaska Peninsula as well, with St. Paul dropping down to 31 tonight. Just below freezing for the Bristol Bay area and into the upper 20s as we move to the YK Delta area. For the Norton Sound area, we do have temperatures dropping into the mid-20s, with Gamble staying a little bit warmer there, dropping down to 29 for a low tonight. In the Kotzebue Sound area, right around 20 degrees, with Kotzebue itself dropping down to 19. Single digits all along the Arctic coastline, with Dead Horse getting down to 0 degrees tonight. In the teens to lower 20s for much of the interior, and then as we get down into the south central area, below freezing for most locations, with Homer getting right to freezing, and Kodiak staying a little bit warmer, only dropping down to 38 tonight. And then down below freezing for more northern locations of the Panhandle, but only getting down to the upper 30s to right around 40 as we get to more southern locations around the Panhandle. Highs for tomorrow, right around 50 degrees for all locations around the Panhandle. A little bit colder there at Yakutat at 47 degrees. Mid-40s to right around 50 for much of the south central. Talkeetna getting a little bit warmer, 54 degrees. Mid-40s for much of the interior, colder as we get further to the north. Fort Yukon only getting up to 33, and Arctic Village to 24. In the teens for the most part along the Arctic coastline, but warmer as we get off towards the west, Kotzebue Sound area, right around freezing. Right around 40 for the Norton Sound area, and into the mid-40s as we move into the YK Delta area, with Aniak up to 50 degrees for a high tomorrow, McGrath up to 52, then right around 50 for areas along the Bristol Bay area, and lower 40s throughout much of the Alaska Peninsula and Aleutian Islands, with St. Paul only getting up to 34 expected high tomorrow. For our flying weather now, we start off with our front out over the eastern Bering Sea. A lot of MVFR and IFR conditions with this front. It's bringing in a fair amount of precip with that warm southerly flow. Behind it, some of those showers are going to drop conditions down to MVFR at times. And then our blowing snow conditions going to keep some IFR conditions along the northern coast, but much of mainland Alaska should be VFR throughout the day. And a few of those showers bringing in some MVFR conditions for the southern reaches of the Panhandle. In the afternoon, going to continue to see those MVFR conditions in the very southern part of the Panhandle. Much of mainland Alaska going to continue to be VFR, but as we get up along the Arctic coastline, blowing snow could still bring some conditions down to IFR. Our front has settled in now over the eastern part of the Bering Sea. IFR conditions expected with that, and then MVFR conditions behind the front for the central and western Aleutian Islands. For our passes, as we saw, we're going to see some pretty clear skies, so all passes going to be VFR, Anaktuvik, Adigan, Lake Clark and Merrill, all expected to be VFR throughout the day tomorrow, as well as Rainy Pass and Windy Pass. Isabel Pass also should be VFR. Mentasta VFR conditions expected. Tanita VFR, Portage VFR, and Chilkoot and White should all be VFR for tomorrow with the clear skies that we are expecting over much of mainland Alaska. As we look at our freezing levels for tomorrow, we have some warmer air pushing into areas of the Panhandle, which is one of the reasons why we're expecting that to stay rain throughout the day. And then as we move into areas further out west, we can see some of the warm air trying to reach in towards the Seward Peninsula. But our freezing line we can see goes out northern parts of the Bering Sea. We have that strong southerly push of warm air coming in there, helping to keep those surface freezing lines further to the north. For our icing, as expected along our front for the eastern Aleutians and Alaska Peninsula, between 2,000 and 5,000 feet expected, but as we get further to the north, that's going to drop down a little bit and be between 1,000 and 5,000 feet. Our other area of icing expected is the very southern parts of the Panhandle, between 3,000 and 7,000 feet there. So for our jet, much of the activity stays to the south. We have some lighter upper level winds over the Panhandle and a lot of the mainland, but out over the very northeastern part, moving around high pressure, we have a northerly component of the jet around 90 knots there, and then exiting out with a westerly direction at 80 knots. For areas right around Kodiak Island, extending out into the Bering Sea, easterly flow 75 knots there, and then southerly flow out from the central Aleutian Islands around 95 knots, pushing off through the Bering Sea, but the main core of the jet stays to the south, about 125 knots there. At 9,000 feet, we can see our winds way out west, westerly flow, 25 knots, but increasing as we get south of the Aleutians up to 50 and then 65 knots. But as we get towards the Aleutians, dropping down pretty quickly to around 20 knots. Eastern parts out ahead of our front, we have 20 to 30 knots, getting up even higher as we get further towards the St. Lawrence Island area, around 40 knots there. Southerly flow continuing for western portions of mainland Alaska, dropping down pretty quickly though to around 10 knots as we get into the mainland. Along the Arctic coastline, stronger winds there, 30 knots out of that easterly direction. Lots of the interior going to see very variable conditions around 5 knots, and then flow around our high pressure pretty light, only around 15 knots there. At 3,000 feet, continuing to see a weaker flow around the high pressure out over the northern part of the Gulf, 10 knots, and then moving out over the northern parts of the Panhandle around 15 knots there, becoming more northerly as it does. We have a southerly component of wind coming in for the very southern parts of the Panhandle, dropping down pretty quickly to around 10 knots. Much of the interior part of the state, we are going to see variable winds around 5 knots there, but as we get into the Brooks Range and further to the north, those stronger easterly winds, 30 to 40 knots expected there for tomorrow. Then as we move along the west coast of the state, southerly flow, our strongest core of winds from Kodiak Island along the west coast, then out towards St. Lawrence Island, 30 knots, getting as high as 40 knots there. Further out west, westerly flow, 20 to 30 knots, with the strongest core of winds staying south of the Aleutians around 55 knots. For our turbulence, just a couple areas of light turbulence expected. Western Aleutian Islands below 4,000 feet. For St. Lawrence Island, below 4,000 feet. And both of those areas expected to diminish throughout the day. Then along the Arctic coastline with those strong easterly winds below 4,000 feet expected, primarily in speed shear and not directional shear. If you stay with us, we'll be back shortly with the marine forecast.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Mary O'Connor with the Alaskan Aviation Safety Foundation and the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health here in Anchorage. I'd like to thank Alaska Public Media for their support of hangar flying, which helps keep Alaskans up to date and informed about aviation topics in Alaska. This evening, we are pleased to have as our guest Oscar Siegel. He's with the Alaska Airmen Association. Welcome to Hangar Flying, Oscar.
Thanks, Mary. It's great to be here.
The airmen have a new group that you're working with called Next Gen. This is different than the Next Gen air traffic transportation
Yes,
system,
it is.
but I do like your play on the titles. Can you tell us what's your Next Gen? How is it different from the other Next Gen?
Absolutely. So Next Gen is a group that's composed out of individuals in the 18 to 35 age group. We have rotorcraft and fixed-wing student pilots and also private pilots. And we are looking to expand also and have it be open to air traffic controllers and other individuals, and really anyone who's interested in getting involved in aviation or joining the aviation community.
So how long has this group been in existence?
The group's been in existence now for about 5 months. It's still relatively new. We just got our executive board established, or pardon me, executive team for the Next Gen group.
Okay. Whose idea was this? It's pretty innovative, and I know that there's a lot of concerns now about bringing new people into aviation and keeping the enthusiasm up. So how did this idea come about?
So the idea was actually a combined effort of the Airmen Association. They wanted to figure out a way to get more youth involved in aviation, and especially with the pilot shortage that's currently happening. They kind of left that task up to me as to how I wanted to go about it. And so I founded the Next Gen group to get more young individuals into flying and to give them the networking opportunities they need in order to advance in their aviation careers.
Okay, very cool. So what is the goal, and how do you judge success?
The way that we like to judge the success is by helping people in general aviation and especially the Next Gen community achieve their goals and get to the careers that they want to be in. So if we can help them achieve that, we've reached our goal.
So this is a kind of a short-term and a long-term project, because pilot training is not an overnight process.
Yeah.
So it can take years until you know that it's working.
Absolutely, and that's what we're hoping for, is to establish long-term relationships.
Good. And what types of activities, or what does the group do?
So the group itself, its primary component is to help get people into aviation and also to help them with networking and talking with people who are further along in their aviation career. So if, for example, you're a student pilot who's just starting, we've got a couple of people that have their commercial pilot's license that you could talk to and get advice from for the critical decision making that's required later on down that career path.
So you mentioned as a younger limit, about 18 years old. I know when I was 18, I had no clue what I wanted to do. Is the group open to people who just want to hear about potential careers in aviation? Maybe they're not in school or in training?
Absolutely, and that's why we have absolutely no entry charge to get into the Next Gen group. We want to invite everyone who's interested in aviation, and although 18 is young, it's a good time to start thinking about an aviation career.
Oh, I agree, and even before that, I think you
Absolutely.
can plant some seeds. So you're not focused just on pilots, though, correct?
Correct. We are open to both fixed-wing and rotorcraft pilots, but then also air traffic controllers, flight attendants, ramp agents, really anyone who's interested in aviation, because the more people that join that community, the more people we have available to speak with people who are potentially interested in going into that industry.
Sure, so even somebody who might want to be a flight attendant
Absolutely.
is invited. Do the members of Next Gen or the people that participate in the Next Gen activities need to be members of the Airmen Association?
They do not. So membership from the Next Gen group and the Airmen Association, to start with, are separate. So in order to become a member of the Next Gen group, you do have to attend 2 meetings. But after that, you can attend our social mixers and also get access to some industry leaders as well.
And when do you meet?
We meet the first Thursday of every month. We have an open meeting at that time, and then quarterly social mixers as well.
And I assume those are at the Airmen new building?
Yes, they are. They are at our brand new headquarters on Lake Hood.
Okay. And if people are kind of thinking about this, but maybe they're not sure, where can they go for some more information?
They can go onto the Alaska Airmen website, that is alaskaairmen.org, or they can also follow us on social media such as Facebook and Instagram at alaska.airmen.
Oh, that's a great opportunity too, and maybe be able to see what you're doing before they make a commitment to join.
Yeah, absolutely.
Perfect. Oscar, thank you for being our guest on Hangar Flying. We'll look forward to having you on our next show, and we'll talk some about your job as the outreach coordinator.
Thank you so much for having me, Mary.
Thanks, Oscar. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching Hangar Flying. We hope you've learned something and are enthusiastic about the future of aviation, particularly in Alaska. Until next time, fly safely.
Welcome back for the marine portion of our forecast. We'll start off with a quick look at the ice edge. A lot of ice starting to erode away with that strong warm flow that we've been seeing from southerly direction out over much of the eastern parts of the Bering Sea, pushing up further to the north. So we are expecting that to continue as well, and that does include the Cook Inlet area. Now looking at our marines, starting off in the southeast part of the state, primarily a southeasterly flow, but all pretty weak winds, 10 to 15 knots there, highest seas 5 feet furthest to the south. Then on Sunday, still pretty weak flow, only around 10 knots out over eastern parts of the Gulf, 10 to 15 for areas of the inside waters, northerly flow as we get further to the north, and southeasterly flow as we get further to the south. For the south central area, a lot of variable flow, around 10 knots out over the Gulf, but we have kind of an outflow set up here for Cook Inlet area, northeasterly flow 10 to 15 knots, continuing northeasterly flow through Shelikof Strait around 20 knots. But for the western part of the Barrens, we do have southeasterly flow, 15 knots there. Then on Sunday, continuing to see variable flow, pretty light out over much of the northern and western Gulf. But as we get closer to Kodiak, that's going to switch up a little, southeasterly flow, 20 knots there. Weak flow around 10 knots through much of Cook Inlet, and then easterly flow around 15 knots for Shelikof Strait on Sunday. On Saturday for the Alaska Peninsula, primarily a southeasterly flow, 15 to 20 knots, with the highest seas south of Sand Point there around 8 feet. Then on Sunday, becoming a little bit more due easterly, 15 to 20 knots, highest seas still south of Sand Point around 9 feet there on Sunday. For Saturday, for the Aleutian Islands, we do have primarily westerly flow, 15 to 20 knots, a little bit of southwesterly flow component as well, especially as we get out towards the western Aleutians, around 30 knots there, with the highest seas out in this area as well, around 18 feet on Saturday. Then on Sunday, becoming more westerly, 15 to 20 knots, seas dropping down to 10 to 11 feet. And then northwesterly as we get further off towards the central and eastern Aleutian Islands, 15 to 20 knots there. Along the west coast, primarily a southeasterly flow around 20 to 25 knots. Southwesterly, closer towards the Pribilof Islands, around 15 knots there. Highest seas west of St. Matthew Island around 11 feet on Saturday. Then on Sunday, due easterly flow 15 to 20 knots, with the highest seas still west of St. Matthew Island around 8 feet. Along the Arctic coastline, easterly flow strongest as we get closer towards Dead Horse and AKwx, around 35 knots there, and then dropping down pretty significantly along the west coast, 10 to 15 knots. On Sunday, continuing to see westerly flow, 15 to 20 knots along the west coast, but as we get along the Arctic coastline, 25 to 30 knots there, dropping down just a little bit from Saturday, but still seeing that strong westerly wind or easterly wind that's causing the blowing snow conditions. Again, we have winter weather advisories out along the Arctic coastline from Barrow out towards AKwx. That's going to last through Sunday morning at 6 a.m. Winter weather advisory for blowing snow. Could drop visibilities down to a half mile or less at times with those strong easterly winds. But over much of mainland Alaska, just some isolated snow showers out in the very far eastern parts of the interior. Down in the Panhandle area, expecting some rain showers to push into the southern portions overnight tonight, with just some areas of higher elevation seeing some snow. Then our front stalling out over the eastern part of the Bering Sea, bringing a warm southerly flow, but bringing rain and east to the eastern Aleutians and Alaska Peninsula, switching over to snow as we get closer towards St. Lawrence Island. Behind this front, colder air, mix of rain and snow showers for the western Aleutian Islands. That's going to switch over to all snow as we move into Saturday, but still with our stalled front, we are going to see southerly flow bringing rain to areas, especially along the Alaska Peninsula from Cold Bay further to the west. Mix of rain and snow expected for the Pribilof Islands, but mixing over to all snow as we get further to the north. Going to push off from St. Lawrence Island area, but will leave fog lingering in the area. And then on Saturday, fog and blowing snow expected all day along the Arctic coastline from Barrow and places further to the east. Some isolated snow showers in the central and eastern part of the interior, with rain in the southern and central parts of the Panhandle. With Alaska Weather, I'm David Kramer.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.